I learned the meaning of financial hardship long before I understood multiplication or fractions. While other children worried about toys, birthday parties, or which cartoons to watch after school, I became familiar with conversations about overdue bills, empty refrigerators, and the constant hope that nothing would go wrong. In our house, every unexpected expense felt like a crisis waiting to happen. The unspoken rule was simple: if you could avoid needing something, you should. That included medical care. As strange as it sounds, I grew up believing that getting sick was almost a luxury our family couldn't afford, whenever I felt a sore throat coming on or woke up with a slight fever. I tried my hardest to pretend everything was normal. I never wanted my parents to notice because I knew what would happen. They would exchange worried glances, quietly count the little money they had left, and begin discussing which bills could be delayed if a doctor's visit became unavoidable. Seeing that fear in their faces hurt more than the illness itself, my mother always had homemade remedies ready. Warm tea with honey, blankets piled high, bowls of soup, and endless encouragement were our version of healthcare. She wasn't neglectful. She simply did everything within her power because professional treatment often came with a price we couldn't manage. If a cold could be survived at home, then home was where we stayed. As I grew older, I became surprisingly good at hiding discomfort. Headaches were ignored. Minor injuries were brushed aside. Even when I caught the flu, I convinced myself that resting quietly was better than admitting how miserable I felt. Missing school wasn't something I considered unless I physically couldn't get out of bed. Perfect attendance wasn't about achievement. It was about avoiding questions and avoiding expenses. Looking back now, I realize how unusual that mindset was. Many of my classmates visited doctors without hesitation whenever they felt unwell. They talked about prescriptions, checkups, and specialists as though these things were ordinary parts of life. I listened without saying much because my reality felt completely different. I couldn't imagine asking my parents for an appointment every time something seemed wrong. I knew how many sacrifices they were already making just to keep food on the table and the lights turned on. Money shaped nearly every decision in our household. Clothes were worn until they couldn't be repaired anymore. School supplies were carefully preserved from one year to the next whenever possible. Family outings were rare because even inexpensive entertainment required spending money that was better saved for emergencies. Ironically, the biggest fear was that someone would actually have a real emergency, despite everything. My parents never stopped working. They accepted overtime whenever it was offered, took on temporary jobs, and often returned home exhausted. Yet no matter how hard they worked, it always felt like we were only one unexpected bill away from falling even further behind. As a child, I misunderstood their stress. I thought they were simply worried adults. It wasn't until years later that I understood the incredible pressure they carried every single day. Things became especially difficult during one winter when I developed a persistent cough that refused to disappear. At first, I insisted I was fine because I knew what medical treatment would cost. My mother continued preparing warm drinks while my father reassured both of us that I would recover soon. But as the weeks passed, my condition worsened. Breathing became painful, and even climbing the stairs left me exhausted. One evening my father came home unusually late. He sat quietly at the kitchen table, placed a small envelope on the counter, and smiled at me for the first time in days. "We're going to the doctor tomorrow," he said. Only later did I learn that he had sold some of his favorite tools to afford the appointment. Those tools had helped him earn extra income for years, yet he didn't hesitate to part with them when my health became more important. That realization stayed with me long after I recovered. As adulthood approached, I carried those childhood experiences into every part of my life. I worked hard in school because I believed education offered the best chance to escape the cycle of financial struggle. I accepted part-time jobs while studying, saved almost everything I earned, and avoided unnecessary spending even when I finally had a little money of my own. Old habits are difficult to break, especially those formed through necessity. Years later, after building a stable career, one of the first things I did was purchase comprehensive health insurance. It may have seemed like an ordinary financial decision to everyone else, but for me it represented something much deeper. It meant that I no longer had to calculate whether I could afford to become ill. It meant I could schedule regular checkups instead of waiting until problems became unbearable. Most importantly, It meant I had escaped one of the greatest fears that had defined my childhood. Today, whenever I visit my parents, I notice how much has changed. They still worry about spending money, but the overwhelming fear that once filled our home has slowly faded. I now have the ability to help them with expenses, encourage them to visit doctors when necessary, and remind them that taking care of themselves is no longer a financial gamble. Sometimes I think back to the child who believed that staying healthy was a responsibility rather than a blessing because sickness carried a price tag. That child grew up believing strength meant remaining silent through pain. Now I understand that true strength isn't pretending nothing hurts. It's creating a life where seeking help isn't something to fear. Growing up without money taught me resilience, gratitude, and determination, but it also showed me how deeply poverty can shape the way people think about even the most basic human needs. No child should feel guilty for catching a cold or worry that a fever might become a financial burden. Yet those experiences gave me a purpose.